There are many obstacles that can block the path to a successful software project. When you come across one, it helps to think like a seasoned hiker and follow the trail marked by blue blazes around the problem so that you can get back on course and keep moving forward. Welcome to Blue Blazes Podcast. I'm your host for the journey, Jay Tower, and I'm a partner and principal consultant at Trailhead Technology Partners. In this series, we talk with industry experts who share their best tips for avoiding the pitfalls on the path to successful software projects. My guest on this episode of Blue Blazes is Tim Corey. Tim is a seasoned software developer and a renowned expert in C# and .NET. You may recognize him from his YouTube channel named I Am Tim Corey, where he provides several new videos every month for free. He's also the lead instructor at IamTimCorey.com, where he offers comprehensive courses on a wide range of topics, including C#, .NET, SQL, Microsoft Azure, DevOps, and Git, to name a few. Tim is a Microsoft MVP and a frequent speaker at software events. Our conversation in this episode is about online learning and how it can help you and your team become better practitioners of software, ultimately creating more successful software projects. Let's jump in. Welcome to the podcast, Tim. Nice to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely my pleasure. Now, I'm used to seeing your face inside of a square on my computer screen, but usually it doesn't respond when I talk. So this will be kind of fun to actually have it be interactive for a change.
I'm forward to it.
So today we're talking about what I think is a very important topic, and obviously you think it's an important topic based on some of your career choices in recent years, which is learning online for professional software developers. Can you, for those who aren't already familiar with you and your content like I am, can you tell everybody a little bit about your connection to .NET, to C# and some of the content you create out there in the world?
Sure. So my connection with .NET started way back in the beginning, 2001, 2002, and it came out. I was already a software developer and kind of transitioned into it. And I spent the next 20 plus years working as a developer and then as a consultant. And I spent quite a bit of time just writing code and helping other people write code. And then I started into teaching, and I started doing that as a side job. I started teaching at a college, and I needed to give them some supplementary materials. So I started a YouTube channel to kind of help out the class, and that kind of took off. And so then I became, I guess, a YouTuber. I don't kind of feel that I'm a YouTuber, but I create content for YouTube. I have over 500 videos now on C# and related topics for programming. And then I also started creating courses. My original goal was I was doing consulting on the side, and I didn't really have time to create enough content for free for people. And so I said, hey, what if I create a course and sold it and then use those proceeds in replacement of my consulting time? That way I'll have more time to create more free content. And that kind of snowballed to the point where I went full-time teaching in 2019. And then I've brought on a team of people. Now I have four employees helping me create content. And really our big thing is the more money we bring in, the more free stuff we create, because the number one goal is to help people and help people become software developers kind of the easy way compared to the way I learned it, at least, which was, full of false starts and trying to figure out what is this thing and how does it work and going down the wrong path and having gaps in your education, all that stuff that I went through kind of learning on my own. So that's where I am now. Okay. So I teach full time.
So that explains a lot. Actually, there was some gaps in my knowledge about your background there, and the combination of software developer and educator makes a lot of sense for what you're doing.
I try and bring that wisdom of, hey, I've been there, done this. There's two ways to learn in life, right? There's either you learn by making mistakes and getting burned, getting your hand slapped, whatever it may be, or you watch somebody else go through that and go, hey, I won't do that. And that's what I try and teach is, hey, learn from my mistakes and be better faster.
There's that saying that goes something like, "Smart people learn from their own mistakes, and really smart people learn from other people's mistakes." Right?
Yep.
um, well, so I'm curious if you've heard of. I'm sure you're familiar with Khan Academy and the guy
Yes.
who started that. It sounds in a way, in a very similar way. Um, like you guys have a similar story about how you got started, where you were creating some content with a very small group of people. I think he did his for his niece or nephew or something in a math
Mm.
class that they were struggling in, and you did yours for uh, an in-person class. So that's kind of cool. Obviously, he's got a little bit of scale on you, but I'll give you
He
some time
does.
to catch up. So, I think this is learning online is uh, such a great tool that we didn't have available 20 years ago. And there was periods of my career. I think you and I have probably been doing this similar amounts of time. There's periods in my career earlier on where there wasn't very much of that stuff available or any of that stuff available online. It was, you would actually go to the Borders or Barnes and Noble and get one of those massive books from the computer programming section, by Rocks or by who were the other publishers back then. Uh, you know what I'm
I
talking
don't
about?
remember. I just remember getting the, learn in 24 hours
Yes, that's
and
right. That
then
was one of them. Yep,
being disappointed in the fact that I hadn't captured all in 24 hours.
that's
So,
right.
yeah.
Go figure. You can't revolutionize your knowledge in 24 hours, right?
Nope.
Um, and then there was also phases in my early career where I was maybe on a small team or a one person team even, and there weren't a lot of people to learn from. And that feels like one of the best ways to learn, like you said, watching somebody else who's been doing it longer, knows more than you, and getting kind of close to what they're doing and absorbing all that knowledge. How do you think this option for online learning unlocks some possibilities for people in that type of situation?
Well, it's revolutionary, right? I mean, like you said, when we were growing up, when we were coming into the fields, it was expensive, it was hard, and there wasn't a whole lot of guidance. There wasn't if you're walking through the wilderness, the first person to go out and do a jungle somewhere, you have to kind of clear the path. But if you've
Mhm.
got a, you know, path that's already been cleared by hundreds of people and you just follow along, it's a whole lot easier, or can be.
Mhm.
So yeah, I worked in a lot of teams where I was the only developer, or I was a consultant where, I'd come in and I wouldn't really have a whole lot of people above me to say, "Hey, here's how to do things," and so it was hard. But now with the state of online education, you can start whenever you want. When you're, a 16-year-old decides, "Hey, I want to be a software developer," cool. Then go on YouTube, start watching stuff, start creating stuff, and you can do that, you know, in your parents' house and get started before you even hit college.
Mhm.
Um, so that's the tools out there are many. The big thing right now is there's two things. One is picking the right kind of path to go down, making sure that you know, it's hard because when you have multiple voices out there, it's also a sea of noise. And so you're like, which one should I choose? And so picking the right path is important. But then also being able to have that kind of discipline
Mhm.
to say, I'm going to watch this content, but I'm also going to then practice it,
Mhm.
because that's where I think a lot of people are starting to struggle is they say, well, hey, I've been consuming all this YouTube content, or I've been reading all these blog posts, and I feel like I should be farther along than I am. And the big reason why is because it takes practice. And that's something that is harder. It takes some discipline to say, no, I'm not going to learn the new shiny stuff. I'm going to actually create practice projects in this, try it out, get some experience, build that kind of muscle memory up.
Mhm.
It's like watching a person lift weights versus actually lifting weights repetitively
Right.
until it makes a change.
Yeah. So you're telling me my plan to watch people lifting weights on YouTube is not going to drastically improve my health?
Yeah, I've been trying it too, just to see, just in
Yeah.
case. But yeah, so far no change.
Okay.
So yeah,
I have noticed in your online content that there's always an encouragement to try things out and get your hands dirty. I think that's, maybe 80% of learning. There's you've alluded to this already. There's that early phase of learning where you could go in a lot of different wrong directions, and having someone there to tell you, "Oh, learn this thing and do it this way and do it in this order," to kind of save you a bunch of time going in the wrong direction. Then there's that practical part that I think is a really important part of learning. How do you recommend somebody who's going, let's say, primarily to free resources online? How do they go about following up with those things that they've maybe now heard someone describe once to actually get their hands dirty and really learn it more deeply?
Yeah, my thing is that you should probably create 2 to 5 practice projects for everything you learn, every tiny little thing you learn. I don't know if you've kind of seen the meme of the kid that's trying to like stretch his legs up 5 stairs and pull
Yeah.
himself up,
Yeah.
or we did it as kids. Um, but but that's kind of what it's like to try and go from I watch a tutorial to I put it into production.
Mhm.
It's technically possible sometimes, but it's that really hard stretch and it's very difficult and it's you strain a lot. Whereas if you take it step by step by step, it's a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
And so my thing is, okay, you watch a tutorial, then go right away and redo exactly what the person doing the tutorial did. Just recreate it. Just retype it out. It's kind of like, when you take notes and you actually write things down,
Mhm.
even the fact that you wrote things down helps you remember it.
Right.
So that's the first thing. But then you try and break it. That's one of the things that I learned early on is that you can't really go wrong trying to break practice code. Real code in production, yeah, you be very careful what you do. In practice code, break it. Like, who cares? So try things out. So figure out, hey, what would this do if I did this? Or what if I took this out? What would happen? Because that kind of learning will help you grow even beyond what you saw in a
Mhm.
video or read in a blog post, to the point where you're like, okay, I understand kind of the boundaries of what this can't do. And then you do that a few times, and then you put it into a larger practice project still. So, like in my courses, one of the things that I do is we build a full application. So we'll take the lessons we've learned so far, maybe 10 or 12 lessons, and then put them together into still a practice project. Because the first time you make anything, it's not going to be great. And you're gonna go, "Oh man, I wish I could have done that better." And that's
Mhm.
that's great if you've realized you've learned and grown through that process, but
Yeah.
you don't want that first one to be production where you're like, "Oh, I should have done that better."
Right.
So put it all together, figure out how this piece A connects to this piece B that you've both learned, but now how do they connect?
Right.
And you start doing that over and over and over again, and you get the practice and experience of actually building real things, even if they are practice. And that's kind of the steps that are skipped between tutorial and production
Yeah.
that really can make a big difference in how far and how fast you can go. It feels slow because you're stuck on a topic for a little bit longer than you'd like. But
Mhm.
the end result is you move much faster because you actually have confidence in what you're doing, as
Right.
opposed to thinking you have confidence until you actually try to use it. And then you're like, this doesn't work the way I expect it to.
That's right.
So
Maybe the analogy is it's like planning out a trip ahead of time, right? Like it takes more work than just showing up and bumbling your way through, but you'll
start
actually
taking
save a
left and right
lot of
turns, right?
time. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. And I also like what you said about, practicing everything 5 times, and I can almost hear some steps in what you were saying too. Like the first one, you're essentially transcribing what someone showed you. You're just copying it exactly, step by step, typing what they typed. Second time, you're maybe tweaking it. Like, ooh, what happens if I change this line? And then third time, maybe you're creating it from scratch yourself and seeing where you go wrong or what you can't remember that you have to look back up again or go back to the video or whatever. I think that's great. If your sixth time doing a technology is the first time you're doing it for someone who's paying you for it, that probably means a lot less regret later, right?
It does. And I think that's also one of the things people see when they look back at their old code, they go, oh man, that's bad code.
Uh-huh.
And they feel bad about it. But I
Sure.
think that's a really good thing.
Yeah,
If you look back at your old code and go, man, that's bad code, then you've grown, you've
yeah,
changed, you've improved.
that's right.
And so if you're looking back at old test code, and practice and going, oh, that's bad code, and I've gotten better, and then you put it in production, that's a whole lot better. And again, you'll have a whole lot less regrets when it comes to eventually having to maintain then what you
Yeah.
built in production.
Yeah. One of the few things I have learned in my years in this industry is that there's no being done learning something. And so if you look back at code you wrote 6 months ago and it looks perfect to you, that might be a bad sign that you've stopped
That's a
growing.
bad sign.
Yeah.
Yep,
So there's an abundance. You just mentioned this a second ago, but there's an abundance of online sources. Obviously, IamTimCorey.com is the best one. But after
of course.
that, you've got your Pluralsights and your Coursera's and your LinkedIn Learnings and so on out there that are available. But you've also got other places you can learn online. Obviously, there's lots of blogs that people put free content out there. There's YouTube videos that are free from you and others. There's also Stack Overflow. There's a Stack Overflow I bring up because there's kind of like an industry inside joke about getting terrible answers from Stack Overflow. Um, so how do you, with all those sources out there that may disagree with each other, 180 degrees, how do you recommend somebody sort out a good source, a reliable source, the right next step for where they're at technically? And how does somebody find the signal in the noise there?
That's the new hard thing,
Mm.
right? Like for us, it was finding a source,
Mhm.
finding a book that had some content in it, and that was the hard thing for us. And now it's the 10,000 voices all shouting at you. Which one do you listen to?
Yeah,
That's hard, and that's something that um, there's not a great answer for. I don't have a magic solution for. I'm trying to be one of those solutions for it. I'll tell you how I'm doing it, but I'm not saying I'm the only voice to listen to.
sure.
But one of the things that I've found is that it's a consistent voice. So when when you go from tutorial to tutorial, you'll, like I said, get conflicting advice. I should do this. No, you should do that. This is good. This is bad, and it becomes confusing.
Mhm.
And so that's why I've tried very hard to do complete content, from start to finish. My training courses are start to finish. The idea that I'll cover the entire topic. Now, not every facet of it, but the entire topic from start to finish, so you can use it. Because of the fact that that consistent voice is important. It makes it a whole lot easier to be able to understand the topic and get fully through it. It's it I would say try and find a consistent voice and follow it. Try and find that one thing to get you through from getting started into actually doing it. At that
Yeah,
point, once you've started to kind of get your legs underneath you, you
yeah,
started to write some code, you started to work in production somewhere, and you started to have a better understanding of the ecosystem, you can start to kind of branch out and get those other voices
mm,
and figure out how to filter, you know,
mhm,
okay, I hear you here, but you know what, that right there, that's not great advice. Or,
yeah,
you know, you can start to make those decisions once you've been there, done that for a while. But
yeah,
getting started, you need to have a consistent voice that takes you through the entire process, because otherwise it's really hard to not have that conflict that's you're not really prepared for.
sure. So is it, I'm sort of putting words in your mouth here, but is it fair to say that at the beginning of that process, it's reasonable for someone to kind of look for a guru or a set of gurus, whether they're someone they know or someone online who creates content?
Yeah, yeah. If you can find someone that again creates that
Mm.
content that is going to take you from tutorial to tutorial, or from lesson to lesson, or course to course, something like that, that would take you far enough to
Mhm.
get you confident.
Yeah.
That's what you're trying to look for, is that one consistent voice in the wilderness.
Yep. I know. And earlier in my career, I had some people like that. One person that pops into my head is Steve Smith, who I'm sure you're familiar with, who writes a lot of really great stuff about architecture and .NET and C Sharp and things like that. And he was kind of my guru from afar, and then got to know him as a friend, got to even work with him for a little while. But and then you sort of start to develop your own voice, maybe, or your own perspective. Yeah.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, it's
So,
the goal of any mentor-mentee relationship, whether
mhm,
you're physically in contact or not, is that they grow beyond you. You know,
yes,
that I want my students to be even better than I am as a developer, and that means going beyond what I can give them.
that's right.
Because yeah, it's we want to be able to grow to that point.
That's right. The old kung fu movie line about the student becoming the teacher, right?
Yep,
Okay, so speaking of that, you create all this great content for people on the internet that are trying to learn new things, get started in new technologies. Who does Tim Corey go to learn new things from?
that's a great question. So one of the places that I go, I'm a C sharp developer, so I'll talk C sharp resources, but there's lots of great resources out there. I try and go to the source as much as possible.
Mhm,
Now that I'm to the point where I can again kind of figure out the signal versus noise,
yeah,
I go to Microsoft themselves. I read,
mhm,
what's new and what's coming out, and then the big thing for me is I take everything that comes out, and I have the time to do this, but I take everything that comes out and I start doing it myself. I practice it. And I see, is this really a big deal or not? How does this work? Um, One of the things that came out, let's see, C sharp 9 maybe was
mhm,
records.
mhm,
And the idea that, they're different than classes. Well, how are they different? And
mhm,
what are the edges of those and how do they work and how would I use them and when would I use them?
yeah,
And so I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out records and understanding records. And so I started with the blog about what they were and how they worked. And
mhm,
then I read some different materials from Microsoft people who are working on them saying, here's how I would use them, and kind of took that information in and so on. But, the number of people in this industry that have great content is kind of overwhelming. And
yeah,
so, I start from the source, but then I go out and look at, who else is out there. The number of authors who are plural site authors that have great content. That list is extremely large.
yeah,
The number of people out there that have YouTube channels of some significance. Not
mhm,
saying that the small ones don't, but if they have a big channel, maybe they have something good to look at. And so I try and kind of spread that out as much as possible, and look at a lot of different resources. There's some great tools out there, Morning Brew, and also what's the one from Alvin? Dewdrops.
mm,
There's
that
a couple
sounds right.
different
Mhm,
aggregators that where they'll bring in a whole bunch of different blog posts and give you one blog post that has links to all the blog posts.
mm,
You know, those are kind of things that are in my feed every day that I look at and go, okay, what are people saying? And so
mhm,
I try and kind of spread out that knowledge, because of the fact that then you get different perspectives.
yeah,
And once you're kind of established a little bit, those different perspectives are good because
yeah,
you want to hear, records are horrible, records are great. Okay, what are each of you saying? How can I
yeah,
better understanding each piece of advice and then form my own opinion about where do I fit? Usually it's in the middle
yep,
because usually there's not extremes to things, but yeah, having that broad audience of people talking to me
yep,
helps me form better opinions.
yeah, that's great. I like the old joke, blanket statements are always wrong, which of course is itself a blanket statement.
Blanket statement. Yep.
Yeah. Um, so one of the pitfalls I feel like that I see happen sometimes, especially for maybe less experienced developers, is they get caught up in, the buzzword of the day. I've got a talk that I'm doing a lot right now at conferences that is about basically microservices being easiest to do wrong and rarely the right solution for most projects. And even just saying that now out loud feels like very controversial because it's such a hot topic, and I feel like so many people think like, oh, if Amazon is doing this and Netflix is doing this and so on, this must be the right way to do software. But there's always nuance, of course, in engineering. So, how do you recommend someone who's learning online kind of avoid those buzzword pitfalls, and what other pitfalls do you see people falling into?
There's a new pitfall every day, right? I mean, like AI is a new pitfall that people fall into.
Sure.
And there's more. Yeah, part of it comes from experience. So I feel like the old guy in the room a lot of times, especially talking to developers, where I'm like, I've seen this before and we'll see it again
Yeah.
because this is, I've heard this buzz about,
Yeah.
the drag and drop WinForm developer, like that was designer. That was the thing that's going to change, revolutionize software development. And, you know, everybody's going to be a software developer, which means no one's going to be a software developer because we can all drag and drop in WinForms. We see how that worked,
Yeah.
you know, and the next thing comes along, whatever it may be. And it revolutionizes the world. Be careful about anything that revolutionizes the world, first of all,
Yeah.
because more often than not, no, no, it really doesn't.
Sure.
It has an impact. It has an effect, but it's not necessarily going to change everything.
Right.
AI is not taking every developer's job away. Um, Microservices is not going to be the way that everything is developed in the future.
Yeah.
So part of it's just whenever you hear hype, pause a little bit and look for why is this maybe not true. But the other part of it is again listening to those different voices, having that. You know, I like to have 30 or 40 different blogs that I listen to,
Mhm.
different people that I watch on YouTube, different people I follow on Twitter, that, I can have in my life saying, hey, maybe this isn't the way. So that I can have those different opinions and go, oh, there's another side to this.
Mhm.
Because yeah, it's easy to fall in the trap of the hype.
Right.
And even watching some people, we've seen the hype around microservices because of the fact that first of all they're fun, they're new, but also because people were interested, and so a lot of people like myself then made videos about it, which then seems to indicate that that's an endorsement of it, which then kind of fuels that
Mhm.
cycle. But it really is the idea of learning the boundaries, learning what they really do, um, and not falling too hard for the hype and trying to
Yeah.
find the alternate viewpoints of everything.
So look for a little nuance and and be open to a little skepticism, it sounds like is worth.
If you can't say it depends on something, then it's
That's
probably incorrect. Again,
that's
blanket
right.
statements, right? Because yeah, is microservices the way? It depends, but probably not.
Right.
Um, is AI
Yep.
going to take over the world? It depends, but probably not.
Yep. Yep. It depends is the joke that every engineer starts their answer with, right?
All the good ones
Um,
do.
that's right. You gotta go beyond that, obviously, you can't stop there, but it's a good start.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, it takes into account, people ask me, well, what's the best X? And I
Yeah.
always tell them it depends, and here's why.
Yeah.
Because, what if two people are building the same exact product in two separate companies, they may have two different best things.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Company A, this may be best. Company B, that may be best. And it's because of their team makeups, because of their backgrounds, because of the current things they have in existence. It's because of, their skill levels, because of what their business wants to support. It's because of where they want to go with it. It's because of so many different factors that
Mhm.
trying to say this is the way is a almost always a foolish statement.
Yeah. Um, so you mentioned this earlier, and I wanted to drill down on it a little bit, but, how does a person kinda lay out the plan for themselves ahead of time for, like, what should I be learning? What's most valuable for me, for my career, for maybe the company or team that I'm working on right now? How do you recommend somebody go about making that roadmap?
Welcome to my life. Trying to figure that out. That's actually
That's
something
right,
we
because
had
you
a
do
team
that for the
meeting.
content, right?
I,
You have to figure out what
I,
to
I
make.
do that,
Yeah.
and really, we had a team meeting last week, and all my team got together in one place, in my office, and we kind of talked through a number of different issues around the company, and that was one of them is learning paths and how to get learning paths right. And for years, I've struggled with learning paths because, on one hand, it sounds like we'll just create a path, but a path to what? Like, what's your end goal? Like we have a learning path to get you started.
Yeah.
We have a C# master course. It starts you from nothing. It teaches you how to become at least a junior C# developer, if not a mid-level C# developer.
Hmm.
But that's because that's the very clear starting point and a very clear ending point early enough before the branching happens. Like, do you want to be a web developer? Do you want to be a desktop developer? Do you want to be a mobile developer? Do you want to be a back end, front end, full stack? Like database, like the list goes on of all you could do. And so you really it comes down to you have to be in charge of you.
Hmm.
Don't fall for the this is the path for everybody, because that's not necessarily the path for you. So again, it comes back to it depends. You have to look at your circumstances and be kind of the captain of your own destiny. Now, there's a lot of good advice out there, and definitely you can look at a path and say, yes, that path works for me. But be careful about just a one size fits all. So you got to figure out, okay, where do I want to be? And maybe you don't know where you want to be in 5 years. So back that up a year. How about 6 months?
Hmm.
3 months. Let's figure out the next 3 months. Where do I want to be, in 3 months from today,
Yeah.
90 days. And so then you can figure out that path because you can say, well, I want to know more about SQL Server.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's figure out what do you not know that you need to know. So
Yeah.
maybe you watch some tutorial to even learn what you don't know. And you go, okay, I need to know X, Y, and Z. What resources are out there to help me get
Hmm.
to X, Y, and Z in 90 days?
Hmm.
And then you do just that. And then you figure out what's the next step. Okay,
Hmm.
no SQL Server. Now I need to know more about Azure because, and it's because of where you want to be in a career or where your company is going or a combination of both, where you
Hmm.
say, okay, my company is thinking about moving to Azure. And if I'm kind of on board and have some skills already, that'll make me more valuable. So therefore, that's the next 90 days.
Hmm.
And so you kind of position yourself to be most most valuable for your company or for the next company. Maybe you say, you know what? I'm not loving this whole front end web development. It's just not for me. Okay. So what do you like?
Hmm.
Figure it out, learn that for your next job.
Yeah.
So you have to be a bit of your own, the captain of your own destiny,
Sure.
and figure out those short paths as opposed to trying to do a 5 year plan.
Yeah.
Because as we know, technology changes so fast that in
Right.
5 years, the landscape will not look like it does today.
Yeah.
So even trying to plan that far in advance is gonna be too hard.
All you got to do is look back a couple years to COVID and how off guard that caught all of us to know that you can't predict the future in this world. But
Absolutely.
yeah, you're right. Even in our industry, that might be a little more true. It changes so frequently. So a short-term plan, that's smart.
Short term plan.
Well, Tim, I could talk about this with you forever, but in the interest of time, I want to wrap up with our last question I like to ask all of our excellent guests, which is basically my way of cheating to figure out who else to invite onto this podcast and what to ask them to talk about. But what other topics or guests do you think would be interesting to talk about, making more successful software projects?
I think one of the things that gets missed a lot is the kind of the human aspect of things.
Mm.
We talk about how do you write better C# code? How do you write better, build better SQL databases? But that's the technical side of things, and that's
Mhm.
very important. But one of the things that I'm finding is there's an awful lot of people out there that don't know, that haven't been there, done that, that needs somebody to come alongside them and share that. So, finding people that have been further along that can kind of share some of the stories of the road, the things that they've gone through, that then they can say, hey, here's my history, and here's what you can do to have a better project. Here's how to work better as a team. Here's how
Mhm.
to have better interactions with your team. Here's how to become more valuable to your team and your organization. Those kind of things can help. So, I mean, that's on one side. And then just finding, great people who are great at writing good software. So one of the people that I follow on YouTube that has been put out some great content is Sean Wildermuth. And he's been doing some great stuff with, just kind of giving you a short little window into something to say, hey, here's this piece of thing that can help kind of add this tool to your toolbox.
Mhm.
And And so that's the other side of it is there are some great technical stuff out there. There's also that idea of finding people who can give those great war stories that
Yeah.
help you, not repeat their mistakes.
Yeah. There are definitely certain guests that we could have on to talk about almost any of the topics, just because their experience and background. So I love that recommendation. Thanks for that, Tim. And thanks for your great content that you put out there on the internet for free, and also the paid content at iamtimcorey.com. Anything else you'd like to mention that's coming soon people should know about?
We're always creating new content. The biggest thing is the YouTube channel because it's the way that I get the most free content to the most people. So the big thing we're working on right now is actually using the power of AI, which is wonderful in some ways. We're actually able to translate our content into more languages, which I am super pumped about.
Nice.
So YouTube recently came out with the option to have captions for any language practically. And that's awesome. That means that my content can reach more people and be more help. And so just kind of look out for that kind of stuff. Like, if you're not a native English speaker, being able to turn on the captions for whatever language that, is your native language can really be helpful. And then just more free content coming.
That's great. Well, I'll definitely be watching the YouTube channel. Thanks again for all you do. And thanks for this great conversation about an important topic.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. That's the end of this Blue Blazes podcast. If you're interested in hearing more conversations like this one with industry experts focused on how to make software projects more predictably successful, make sure to subscribe. Trailhead can be found online at trailheadtechnology.com, on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Until next time, thanks for listening.